You found the skeleton. How would you tell people that it's honest? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey there YouTube, the Dapper Dinosaur here. You may be aware of my recent series on one Dr. John Sanford. If not, it's linked in the description, and you may want to go watch it before this. Go ahead, I'll be here when you get back. Okay, welcome back. This is a rather unusual video for me to make, as I normally don't do follow-ups to my series, in part because they're usually in the canon on YouTube 2 to 5 months before I even premiere them. Although you can watch them early if you join the channel as a member, or if you join my Patreon, links below. So why am I making this? Well, because there was an attempt at a response to the series. And I'll be honest, I was hoping to get a response. Although, as we'll see, it left nearly everything to be desired. You see, the series was titled Sal's Pal in reference to one Sal Cordova, a young Earth creationist with whom I still considered myself to be on good terms. When I went into this project, having not seen much from Dr. Sanford, my only real knowledge of him was that he had written the book forming the core of the creationist idea of genetic entropy. That is, Genetic Entropy and the Mystery of the Genome, and that he was a co-author of the book Bones of Contention. I was more familiar with the latter, which is scholarship that borders on academic fraud, but then I am willing to say that since this is far outside Sanford's field, maybe he just doesn't know better. All this is to say that going into this, I had a guarded but positive disposition towards Dr. Sanford. To put it mildly, that did not stick around much. At first, I planned to give some examples of his more egregious statements in his talk that I covered right here, but frankly, at that point, I just have to embed the whole series into this video, but that would put this video well past 2.5 hours. Further, my objections are clear in that series. Instead, I'll make occasional references to points he made when they become relevant. The part of the series that really got Sal's goat was when I accused Dr. Sanford of dishonesty. Unfortunately for him, Sal didn't bother to watch any of the videos as far as I can tell, and simply reacted emotionally. This is a bit of a problem. So, before I say that I think someone is dishonest, I have to first consider the possibility that they are simply ignorant or unintelligent. If a 4-year-old cannot tell you why the Earth is a globe, it's probably not a result of dishonesty, but rather they are simply not really capable of understanding the concepts. Similarly, if a person from Japan misquotes Shakespeare, that's most likely the result of being misinformed and ignorant of his works, since he's not widely taught outside the Anglosphere. But what if a professor of English loudly and publicly declares that English is in fact a Celtic language that descends from the Pictish language spoken by the people conquered in Great Britain by the Romans, and is not in fact a Germanic language brought to the island of Great Britain well into the first millennium CE by Germanic peoples? Well, to get to be a professor of English, one generally has to know a great deal about the English language, and has to be mentally agile enough to do original research and defend a thesis in front of a panel of experts. It's hard to see how such a person could be honestly saying that English is a Celtic language, and so the reasonable belief shifts to dishonesty. What about a situation where someone is speaking outside of their field of expertise? Well, then ignorance becomes much more likely, but that can be overcome if they use their credentials, or supposed but lacking study of the source materials, to lend themselves credibility that they actually lack. For example, if someone were to say that On the Origin of Species was devoid of any use of numbers or math, while presenting themselves as an expert in the topic, who presumably read the book in question, that would be an obvious lie. At worst, they had read the book and are knowingly lying about it. At best, they have not read it, but are using their implied credentials to make their audience presume that they have read it, even though they know they have not. Both are dishonest. Now, perhaps despite having a PhD, which is usually a sign of a fairly high mental capacity, someone is in fact simply an utter moron. Perhaps they got the credential because their board felt bad for them, or someone bribed their board to approve their thesis. Who knows, but I guess it's possible. In this case, it once again becomes reasonable to say that perhaps they are simply misinformed or ignorant. Can this be said of Dr. Sanford? Well, not according to Sal. Sal's first response to me was entirely an exercise in hagiography about Dr. Sanford's gigantic gigachad brain power. And you know what? Fair enough. I'm willing to say that Dr. Sanford is the world's premier hypergenius, and that he is the biggest, most wrinkly anxiety meat in the known universe, and for all time. Here's the problem with that. It makes it more, not less likely, that he's lying. Even more egregious than the numbers lie is when Sanford just skips over sexual selection, which Darwin discovered and used to explain the peacock's tail fan, and instead just tells his audience that Darwin was sick over it and leaves it at that. What am I supposed to think? That he has never read Darwin and so didn't know better? Well, then he shouldn't be citing works he's not familiar with, because by doing so while being presented as Mr. Big Brain Christian Scientist Man, he's implying he does know what he's talking about. Okay, now it's time for some blunt, real talk. Young Earth creationism is categorically wrong. Its models are physically impossible, contradict reality, and produce no useful avenues for new research. And that's just when they're not unfalsifiable wishful thinking. Young Earth creationism is the intellectual equivalent to Flat Earth. In both cases, science has moved on a long time ago, and most people in the relevant fields don't even really know that Flat Earthers or creationists still exist. Creationism is so wrong that it normally takes little more than being a sophomore in college studying a particular topic before one can realize how wrong creationism is about basically all of its distinctive claims in that topic about the natural world. Zooming in on Dr. Sanford's work, he absolutely knows that he had to redefine fitness for his idea of genetic entropy to work. He also had to misrepresent Moto Kimura and others about the frequency and selectability of beneficial mutations. Further, no matter how fancy the code is for his population genetics simulator, Mendel's accountant, he knows that it does not produce results that match real-world experiments in population genetics. Let me continue to be clear.
Let me be clear.
Genetic entropy is extremely stupid. It is on the same level as declaring that no, in fact, water is not made up of oxygen and hydrogen in a 1-to-2 ratio. Instead, it's its own element, just like the Greeks thought. I won't be going in depth on this here because I will be having a guest on who is an actual expert in population genetics and evolutionary biology to talk about it with me. If you're watching this after that show is scheduled on the channel or after it comes out, there will be a card linking you there, and it will be in the description, provided that I remember to do so, which is no guarantee. Now, how confident do I need to be before I say someone is lying? Generally, I need to think it more likely than not, and usually significantly so. Something like 75% confidence. Certainly that's not enough for a conviction in a US criminal trial, but then I'm not a jury. I just call him like I see him. So what can be done to make me retract any claim that Sanford is lying? Easy. Since he's presenting his big-brainedness as a reason to trust him, I need to be convinced that Dr. John Sanford is just too stupid to read On the Origin of Species, Darwin's Letters, and Descent of Man, and actually understand them, and is too stupid to recognize numbers and numerals. I also need to be convinced that he is too stupid to understand the work of Dr. Moto Kimura and his associates, which he misappropriated for his nonsense. Simply telling me that he was misinformed about those things means that when he was citing them, he was lying. Citing a work means that you read at least enough of it to know it says what you say it does in context, and that what you're saying about the work is true. If you can't do that and you want to rely on the report of another person, Roop, for example, then you're obliged to cite that person. Sanford wouldn't be lying, perhaps, if he said, "My guy Roop once told me that On the Origin of Species doesn't have numbers in it." That seems like something that might happen. But of course, we all see how unconvincing it is when he says that. So of course, that's not what Sanford did. Instead, he cited a source that he either didn't read or couldn't comprehend. Now, let's be clear. Even if Sanford had just cited Roop and then gone with it, that would still be unacceptable, as it means that at no point had he fact-checked Roop for accuracy on even the most outlandish claims, which is profoundly lazy and uncaring of the truth.
I'm just a big toasty cinnamon bun. I never want to leave this bed. Uh-oh. Got it.
Fact-check Roop.
Think, man. Think. Think. I better get up.
So, since Sal is apparently interested in responding to me, I look forward to the time he spends showing me just how unintelligent the man who invented the gene gun is. Remember, among well-informed, honest, and creationist, you can pick at best 2. The best young Earth creationists have done is Todd Wood, who admits openly that evolution is well-evidenced and productive, but thinks that he can probably figure out how to overturn it anyway, while acknowledging that he hasn't managed it yet. At that point, I think the person he's being dishonest with is perhaps himself. If you're a creationist and you're watching this, I want you to ask yourself, why is it that it's so easy to find creationists of all levels of education being evidently dishonest? At the lowest levels, we have clear idiots like Matt Nylor, who will pretend that a peer-reviewed journal published one of his screeds when they absolutely did not, given that he couldn't even meet the formatting requirements. Somewhat higher up, we have people like Carl Baugh presenting normal-sized pacu fish as piranhas to pretend that he had managed to raise giant piranhas in a simulated pre-flood world. A bit higher than that, we have people like Andrew Snelling literally using people on his trip to stand in front of the stress fractures in a folded sediment, while saying such stress fractures don't exist, and offering the photograph in which these people are hiding them as evidence, or presenting as evidence that exquisite preservation needs a global flood, fossils from both before and after where he puts the flood, which is Cambrian to end Cretaceous for him. It's the point where when a creationist says anything that's right, that is beyond like a 6th grade level of scientific knowledge, I get impressed. Well, at this point, I rather think I'm starting to ramble. While this was an unusual video, I do think it needed to be made, and if you enjoyed it, please do hit like. Let me know in the comments what you think of Sanford's credibility, and if you're a creationist, feel free to try to convince me that he's simply too stupid or ignorant, and also, let me know why it is that almost every time I check any claim of significance from a creationist, it turns out to be completely wrong. Either way, I do hope you subscribe and turn on all notifications with the menu under the bell icon. That way you're always alerted when I have new content, whether because you like it, or you want to explain how wrong I am. Either way, I'm the Dapper Dinosaur. Thanks for watching, but before you go, I just want to say a special thank you to my channel members and my patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Bob Knob, Tapioca Weasel, Klaus Jepsen, Bent Hovend, Kevin Brostek Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babbity, Monkey They Them, San, Denny5252, Eleron Teller, Phil Havara, Ian Chen, Mrs. Spexinder, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, and Scriptic Mystic. As you probably know, YouTube is a very volatile platform, and from month to month my income on the channel can swing wildly. But the people you see on screen are directly supporting so that I don't have to worry too much about that, and the channel can keep going as it is, and perhaps even improving. If you'd like to join this team, there are links below to join the channel or in the description to join the Patreon. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, and the channel memberships start as low as $1.99 a month. On Patreon, you can even get a discount for pledging annually. If you do decide to pledge, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server just for channel supporters, as well as early access to all of my pre-recorded videos, often up to 2 months in advance. Higher tiers will unlock even better perks. Now, if the annual or monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there is a merch store down in the description, as well as an Amazon wishlist, just for me. And if financial support isn't something you can or want to do, then if you still want to help out the channel, please just like and share these videos and make sure you comment on them. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching.